give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Hi.
What are we doing about it?
Not a goddamn thing. Except revolt, revolution, viva la revolution.
That is it. I mean, it's the U.S. I'm thinking about all of the times that we've heard in history in school. And it's so funny because when I was a student, I could not stand history class. Like history class was just, like,
me too.
First for me, like for real, like I couldn't understand it. I was just like, how could people be this way? It just made no sense. But now I really appreciate history in a completely different way because it is giving us windows of understanding into how like people set up like social structures and strategies, you know? And so just seeing the way that and the more information that we're getting now about the lies of the history that we were told, you know, like this narrative that we have about this country and the founding fathers and what their vision is. That's what we were like kind of talking about in one of our other episodes, is the vision for this country and what democracy should have looked like, and us never being able to achieve that, you know, in a very real way. And you were saying before
Yeah. And I was saying that the more I learn, the more I really feel like, you know, the founding fathers, as we like to call them, knew what they were doing when they did this. They knew, I mean, if you think about what they came over here to steal land because it's classic victim turns oppressor, right? Because they feel they in their minds, they thought they were being victimized by, you know,
their countries.
Their country, a king who had the audacity to tax them or whatever. And they didn't like that. So they came over here and stole the land and destroyed the native population, the indigenous population. And, you know, and then created a governmental structure that I think they knew exactly what they were doing when they did it. And there have been interpretations over the course of the hundreds of years. You know, we're coming up this year as the 250th anniversary of
this
country,
of the United States. 250 years of forming systems of oppression on a
lead directly to fascism.
That on a high in a hierarchy, like right, this kind of white supremacist hierarchy. And at the 250th anniversary of this country, the current administration is trying to return it to this kind of founding fathers visionary. And the visionary, one of the pushbacks that I have to the understanding, my existence in like the visionary didn't matter. Like me as Black, identified as Black woman, like I wasn't even a consideration as anything other than a tool. And I don't even know if at the beginning, the founding fathers, I was just not even a consideration. I was a tool. I might have been able to produce some more babies to farm on some.
Right.
That's the reality of
free labor and wealth development. That was it.
Right. Exactly. That was the reality of Blackness in the United States. And I say that because I don't ever want that to be the beginning of the Black identified story, right? That's just the story of like the founding of the United States.
My ancestors did to your ancestors.
And the way that they were thinking about not valuing human life because of color and origin. And they're doing that to now in this moment today, not thinking about human life because of color and origin. And or even if it doesn't have to do with color, it has to do with the fact that you are not following in what is considered the social norm to to exist in, like, right? So like if you're a part of LGBTQ, or if you're a part of another faith base, the xenophobia, all of the things that are occurring, if you are white identified looking but not falling into white Christendom under this hierarchical scale, you are not a human to be valued. We see that through ICE. We see that through the overcriminalization in our communities. We see that through the legislation that is coming through. I find it fascinating that the narrative storytelling about the United States is that it is this melting pot of opportunity for people, and it absolutely is not. That is not the reality. And that is the system that is in place. Though the system has evolved, it is still the system that is in place, and it is the foundation of how we exist in the United States.
Absolutely. And I feel like right now what we're seeing it evolve into, I mean, slavery has evolved over, slavery has existed, time immemorial all around the world. Mm-hmm. But the slavery that the U.S. perfected, the chattel slavery that my ancestors perfected, was unique in its horrificness and its violence. And we've watched over the course of, for anybody listening that is outside the U.S., we've watched over the course of these 250 years, nay more, how that has changed. With the Emancipation Proclamation had the butt clause in it, where as long as you were criminalized, as long as you were a part of the criminal punishment system, you could then be enslaved. And we've watched that change over, there's always something new. It always morphs into something new, but it still stays the same. We have, the prison, the convict leasing that's happening, where prisons will contract with, for those who don't know what it is, will contract with companies, manufacturing companies,
Amazon, let's name them,
and will use prison labor. So people who are incarcerated in the U.S. prisons, the prison will contract out their prisoners to perform labor for cents on the dollar, which is it's just another form of slavery. Yeah. So we've watched this happen over and over and over. So, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed in 250 years. This year is all going to be about, we saw a little bit of it at the Super Bowl, celebrating this glorious nation that has survived for 250 years. And it just makes me want to throw up when I think about how they're saying that, knowing absolutely full well what they are creating, what it is, what the modern day version of suppression, oppression, and enslavement is going to look like based on at this 250-year-old mark. And I can just see them just, oh goody, what are we going to come up with next? How are we going to be able to find that power structure? How are we going to be able to make that even stronger than it was even 4 years ago, 10 years ago, 5, and it's so insidious and yet blatant, right? Shadow and yet full fucking spotlight on it. I mean, the dichotomy of it. And I think it gets more and more, I've always said that Trump was a personification of our
spoiled child.
Do what?
A spoiled child, an overgrown 2-year-old.
Well, no. I've always said that Trump is a personification of the absolute evil of this country. And I do not use that word ever. I mean, I usually, I stopped using it because I felt like it was a cop-out. I felt like it was a way for people, if I said that something outside of myself was evil, then somehow I was always protected. I would never be that bad. If I called it evil, it was a way of distancing myself from the real possibility that I could cause just as much harm as whatever that thing is. So I never use the word evil, but I got to tell you, and I think it's interesting that your technology is getting fucked with and you're not even in U.S. soil, but is that just because I'm the white woman in this equation? I don't know. But yeah, I've always said that he was the personification. So if we're looking at 250-year anniversary of this country, it's taken us 250 years to fully and wholeheartedly embody the
Mm.
absolute fucked upness of
Mhm.
white supremacy in
Mhm.
Trump. I mean, in his narcissism, in
Mm.
his childlike behavior, in his tantrums, in his bully propensities, in his overt and completely I don't give a shit who knows racism. And now we're finding in his pedophilia and his sexual, prowess and his raping of underage girls and how he finds that to be enticing. I mean, it is absolutely, if you think about all the characteristics that he
Mm.
exhibits, that is this country.
Yeah,
So on the
that
year of our
is.
250th anniversary, we have
It's a poster
manifested his
child.
personification to be the person sitting in the highest office in the land. Yay,
And
us.
yeah, that's
Yeah. It's
very
fucked
scary.
up.
It's very scary. I'm glad to be surrounded by people who don't champion the United States. And I'm so curious
Mm,
about like other countries that are not champion the United States. Like, in the same way that the United States has, been championed
mhm.
because people are, I don't know, I guess addicted to how much resource we have or how much
Yeah.
capitalism we hold or,
Yeah.
how much privilege
Power
existed and
and
power that we
privilege.
existed.
Yeah.
But people are being able to witness and see that it's imploding on itself at this point. It really is like in a very sick way. You are seeing sickness manifested and what happens when you allow this level of sickness to go unchallenged. And
Yeah.
I don't want to devalue the work of all of the folks that have spent and dedicated their lives into challenging existing systems so that we can evolve into a place where more people can have access to privilege.
Mm,
Um, but I am also calling in all of the people who supported the rhetoric and are riding and privileging and and benefiting from this administration right now and are okay with it
mm.
and are being silent in allowing it to move because I'm not being touched, I'm not being impacted, I'm not being affected. But throughout this administration, we're only in the first year of it. you
Yeah.
best better believe, you best better believe that as these next couple of years go by, it's only going to get worse because they're continuing to steamroll through this Project 2025. And Project 2025 is only for a very small percentage of people
Yeah.
in the United States.
Yeah. Um, I don't, and the connection that we see with Israel and what's happening in
Mm.
Palestine is so interesting to me because I used to, and I still think, white supremacy is the root of all the evil, but Zionism is I'm starting to understand the level of supremacy that Zionism supports. And I am I'm formulating the thought process that Zionism is where we're headed, which is
Oh,
an even
explain what you
deeper.
mean by that. Because I look at Zionism as a form of white supremacy that's faith based.
I don't think it's faith-based though. I think it just so happens that it's Judaism is where it began. But well, people that
Well, but
identified as Jewish, not
right.
it's not actual about Judaism.
But the
I
fact
don't
that
think
we are
it's
naming it as Zionist, we're naming a group of people that hold a specific faith base and are existing in that faith base in a very white supremacist hierarchical way.
yeah, but yes. And I guess the pushback that I have about using it that is saying it's faith-based, I think faith is what they are using as a tool. It reminds me of when 9/11 happened and we heard so much about Islamic terrorists, Islamic terrorists, Islamic terror.
Mhm.
It was always, you always had the Islamic in front of it, which is all to me just an extension of the boogeyman that was the current boogeyman at the time.
Mhm.
But and I remember having conversations with people who wanted to latch on to the, they're terrorists because they're Islamic was
Mm. Oh
the
yeah,
mind,
no, that's not it.
the
No, no, no.
mindset that a lot of people had.
Yeah.
And I kind of, that's what I compare what's happening in Zionism. That's what I compare that to in terms of Judaism is to Zionism as Islam is to terrorism. It's like, it's not faith-based. The Islamic people that perpetrated 9/11, I don't believe, I've come to learn that Islam is a very peaceful religion and is very
Mhm.
peace loving. They tainted it. They took it. That was where they found their fundamentalism and they went for it. Timothy McVeigh, when he blew up the Oklahoma City building, he was a Christian terrorist. He
Mhm.
took his Christianity and it was fundamental, he used
Like
it
there's
as a
nothing.
fundamental
Mhm.
tool to hurt people. So I guess that's, to me, I liken Zionism to the same thing. It just so happens that it is um
People of Jewish faith.
obvious in wrapped in Judaism, but they're not practicing the Jewish faith by doing what they're doing. So they're hijacking it. They're using it as a tool because to a lot of people, Judaism comes along with being a victim. And that's part of the Zionism mindset that I've been learning is that, it started with, we were victimized during World War II. We've been victimized forever. And so therefore we should be allowed to claim this land that's not ours. And so the victimization is a big piece of that for Zionists. But I don't think it has anything to do with Judaism. I think they're using Judaism as a tool. And if others that are listening or watching have a differing opinion, we'd love to hear about it in the comments, because that's how I'm unpacking all of this and starting to really try to understand it.
But they're using it as a tool to exert power and control.
Yeah.
Hmm.
To,
They're
to feel
using they're
to feel
using their faith base as I'm getting confused.
they're using it. The optimal word there is using. So I don't believe they truly believe in Judaism. They don't practice Judaism. They don't
Okay.
they
Now
don't actually walk the steps
I
of
get it.
Judaism, because
Ah,
Judaism believes in love and,
yeah.
togetherness and treating people with
Helping
humanity and
people.
respect and,
Yes.
not
Yes.
bombing other people. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
a tool. That's all it is. So they say it's their faith, just like the Islamic
Exactly.
extremists that perpetrated 9/11 said Islam was their faith, but that
Mhm.
wasn't what they were walking. It wasn't what
Mhm.
they were practicing. And
Mhm.
so, and I think Zionism is a particular level of evil to this point, because Judaism can be wrapped in victimhood because of the historical context that we have, that we've been taught all of our lives about. And then of course with what happened in during World War II, that is an actual experience of victimization on a
Mhm.
particular group of people because of their faith.
Mhm.
So you wrap victimization into a supremacist mindset and ideology, and
Mhm.
it's very similar. We were just talking in the last episode about white women. It's
Right.
very similar to white womening,
Let's
right?
hear about that.
Because
And victimization. Yeah.
because we are the ultimate victims, right? We always love to talk about the patriarchy and how put upon we are by the patriarchy, and we're just like you because of the patriarchy. And yet we cause an incredible amount of harm all the time, every day, every
Under
moment.
the patriarchy.
Right.
In support of the
Right.
Mhm.
So to me, that's white women and Zionism, that level of supremacy married to victimization and victimhood is a particularly nasty brew
Mhm.
of evil. Because if you can paint yourself as the victim, you can then get away with, I mean,
Harm.
we've watched Israel do this to Gaza for, in Palestine for many more years, but certainly the last 2.5. And
Mhm.
so, we are the victims. We are the victims. But October 7th, I mean, you talk to a Zionist now, it's 2.5 years later, and Gaza is completely decimated. And they're still going to say, but October 7th. It's like,
Mhm. Yeah.
so yeah. That's my soapbox. I don't know if I said anything.
No. I get the soapbox, and I'm curious to like bring the conversation full circle as like, do you think that this current administration is standing in victimhood? Like, are they calling in
Yeah.
victimize because and what is the victimization that this administration is existing under? I mean,
whiteness is being persecuted. I've
mm,
actually heard them say that. Yeah, I mean, they've said it all along. You know, why that's always been a
and
whiteness loves to be the victim.
whiteness is a completely made up concept because
I know.
where are you people from again? You're
Scotland,
Scotland,
and Ireland.
Ireland.
I am as white can be.
My younger brother too is Scottish and Irish too.
Yeah.
And Jamaican and Chinese. And
then I got a little colonizer in there too. I got the British stuff in there too.
Color, but he's about your color. Anyway, but yeah, so like, because whiteness, again, like people outside of this country that are thinking about how we in the United States look at whiteness versus everything that's non-white. So you can be from some place. And again, whiteness, it took time to become what we understand whiteness as today, because as different people were migrating onto the United States territory, they were persecuted at different levels. So, you know, Irish people went through a whole issue. German people went through a whole issue. These are like quintessential white folks now. Italian people, you know, that's why we have like in New York is a wonderful place because you know you can go to Little Italy, you know where the Irish Scottish folks are living, you know where the Jewish white Jewish identified people are existing. Like it really shows you how segregated through ethnicity the United States is, at one of the biggest cities that we have, because I'm saying New York City in particular, not the whole state of New York, but New York City in particular really shows you the diversity of migration into the United States. And when you see that in that way, or you grew up in it, because I did grow up in New York, you get to appreciate people's different ethnicity because everyone's cohabitating together on their little blocks and in their little communities, and you get to have some wonderful food. So there's an opportunity for us to exist in a very beautiful way. But then you had this history throughout this 250 years where, because of capitalism and proximity to whiteness and the white heteropatriarchy, they are creating their united front of whiteness by then saying, okay, we persecuted all of y'all, but now we want to make sure that we hold power and control. So now we're going to call ourselves all white, even though we come from completely different areas and have completely different ethnicities and completely different cultures associated with those ethnicities, because the parades be bomb.
We're going to let you assimilate because we need the numbers.
But we need the numbers.
But we're going to keep the power. You know, the Epstein class is going to keep the power.
And we're going to use you guys as a united front conglomerate of whiteness. And then we're going to say everything that is not this is antithesis to this.
Is wrong.
And that is really what the narrative storytelling, this 250-year storytelling of the creation of the United States is this.
Yes. And everything that is outside of what we've established as whiteness is the boogeyman.
Exactly.
And they are always trying to take from you, and they're always trying to take your job. I mean, what is the first thing we hear?
Never taking anything.
What was the first thing we hear when the argument against immigration was they're taking your jobs. They're taking your jobs. You know, I mean, back in the day it was they're stealing your women, they're raping your women, you know, and
that is this. Yes.
And that was what Trump said as he came down the escalator when he ran for office the first time, was there, you know, he was talking about people coming from Mexico and they're bringing drugs and they're raping your women, and they're rapists, they're murderers, So yeah, that's where that all ties in for me, in terms of, even though it is a particular level of, I mean, we talked about gaslighting in the last episode. It's a particular level of gaslighting to be able to say that I hold all the power and yet I am the ultimate victim. And when you couple that victimization into that mix, it really, I don't know what it is about humanity that I don't know. I don't know what it is about humanity that seems to really attach to a victim storyline, to a sense of victimhood. I don't know if that's bred because of capitalism and the ideologies that we've grown up with. I mean, I wish I knew how humans were before these capitalistic societies existed, whether or not that victimization or victimhood was a key component of things. I don't know. Got any
Yeah,
wisdom on that?
that's a really good question to like be curious about, because I I wonder what victimization looks like outside of capitalism, because
I
I
do
don't
too.
know how to exist outside of capitalism because that's what I was born into.
Right.
And so, but and capitalism has exist it does exist all of the places that I go to, because it is
I
like
know.
infiltrated like all of our ways of being. And this the con I would really I think that we should take time to explore this concept of a victim, like, you
Yeah.
know, like have a conversation about what is a victim, who claims victimhoods, what does victimization actually look like. And it speaks into what we were talking about in the other episode about the victims of the Epstein file who are not being acknowledged, and there's no accountability being held for the harm that they've experienced. And in a culture that is founded on so much violence, and the violence continues to be perpetrated, continue all over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Um, what does it look like for us to really be shifting out of violence when that is the culture of the United States? It's the
Right.
culture that it gives you.
And to not take away from, I don't want to make it sound like I'm suggesting that there are no victims, right? I am a victim myself of sexual
Mhm.
assault. So I'm not saying I call myself a survivor. I work with I'm on the board of a organization in Charleston called Palmetto
Mhm.
Hope Network, and they do work with survivors of domestic violence. And we are very specific about calling them survivors because to me, it's victim is just perpetuating the sense of victimhood, to use the term
Mhm.
victim. Although in the courts and things, the terminology is victim. You don't use survivor in the courts, and so that's a bit of a. But so I'm not suggesting that victims don't exist. There are
Mhm.
people that are victimized upon by others. There's a
Well,
difference in my mind. There's a difference to the sense of victimhood that our society breeds. I mean, when I was raising my daughter, her father was a perpetual victim. It was always everybody else's fault but his own. He was a classic narcissist. And when she would she would adopt that, you know, because she's a child and children learn what they live. And so she would see him doing that. She would see him doing that perpetual victim thing, and she would do it automatically. Well, I didn't, you know, somebody else, and I didn't, you know, and I would say to
okay.
her all the time, I'd say, there are no victims, only volunteers. I said that to her all the time because I wanted her to understand her own accountability. You know, it's not that
Yeah,
she couldn't have been victimized. It was
yeah,
that, you know, there's a difference. You need to own accountability for what you do, you know, even if you're going to get in trouble, even if you feel shitty about yourself, whatever it is, that accountability is really big. And I don't think our society knows how to, we don't teach accountability. I mean,
well, as you're
clearly.
saying this, as you're saying this, I think that this is what our ethnic differences like come in,
Okay. Okay. Yes.
because I am thinking about the way that I was parented and the way that I was raised, and even through like the Black church, it's like you're supposed to be wrong and strong. Like that's even like the terminology that we use. So it's
Okay.
like even if you've done something, you come up and you say that you've done it. And I'm curious if this is because I'm wondering if this is, and I'm making this like association now that I didn't experience, but like I'm wondering if this does have to do with slavery, because if you did not call into accountability for you, everybody got blamed for something. Everybody had to, like, you know what I
Ah,
mean? Because like I'm
right.
like, we weren't allowed to You
Right.
cannot come and say somebody else was the reason for you behaving.
I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
You could not do that. You had to be wrong and strong. Like, yo, that's the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, like no, you call it
That's a
accountability.
cultural difference right there. Yeah.
You also don't snitch on somebody else because somebody else has to stand in their own accountability. Like you definitely can't snitch in our communities. Snitching in our communities will get you stitches. Snitches get stitches. What? I'm giving you all the terminology, right?
I remember hearing that when I was growing up.
You definitely couldn't snitch, but then you also have to be wrong and strong. Like, so if you've done something, you need to stand on 10 toes down that you've done it, because other people are going to be impacted by you, not because it's not just going to come to you. It's going to come.
Yeah,
to
that goes back to slavery for sure. And whiteness doesn't know how to do that. In my experience in whiteness, it's all about blaming it on somebody else. It's never your fault. It's always somebody else. Both of my previous husbands were like that. They were both white men, and they would not. My second husband would go to the ends of the earth to not be wrong. It could not be his fault. And I remember standing there just begging him, going, nothing is going to happen to you. Just say you fucking did it. You know, I don't understand. And he would not. There was only one time in the 11 years that we were married that he ever apologized for something that he did without 20 rationalizations about why he did it after the I'm sorry. Only one time. I remember it as clear as the nose on my face because it was the only time he ever did it. And that's such an interesting cultural
difference. Classic. I'm like, you're saying that, and I'm like, we couldn't be blaming nothing on nobody else.
Oh no, we blame everything on everybody else. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Couldn't possibly be our fault. Wow. Yeah.
I love when we uncover these moments of, because you were saying it, and I was like, nah. I don't remember. So I don't relate to that. Other people, if they've had that experience, but for most of us, it's like, nah, we're gonna be wrong, Sean. Send 10 toes down on what you did, because what can somebody do? I mean, to you, really? I mean, and you want to get everybody
understanding the consequence, understanding the connection to slavery. That if one person was found, if one person didn't claim it, everybody was going to suffer, and so it becomes a survival technique. That's deep.
It's deep.
That is deep.
And with that, get deep, y'all.
That's all we got.
So what's the cultural context that you have about victimization? That is it.
That is it.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.